Hello, today we'll be chatting with Neil Alliston from Ravin.AI. Neil, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ben. Great to be here.
Neil is VP of Product at Ravin.AI. Ravin is a UK Israel-based startup building AI solutions to autonomously inspect vehicles for damages. Can you tell us a bit more about this, Neil?
Yeah, sure. So the problem that we're trying to solve with Ravin is, remember the last time that you rented a vehicle and that vehicle drove out of the rental site and you probably had to look around and do an inspection for damage to give yourself peace of mind. Now, across industries, vehicle inspections are still being done manually. And the issue with that is they are expensive, they're time consuming, and they're not consistent. So 4 or 5 different people looking at the same vehicle could give you a different inspection result, a different condition report. So what we're doing with Ravin is we're using computer vision technology and combining it with everyday off-the-shelf camera hardware, like from a smartphone or from CCTV or security cameras, and automating the vehicle inspection process.
One of the things that I read about is that you piloted your product in London Heathrow Airport, and the outcome was 22% more issues detected than a conventional inspection. I mean, that's a massive increase. Can you tell us how that came to be?
Sure. So we work with Avis Budget Group, the rental car company globally. And they were one of our first customers. And we set up this pilot, as you said, at their location at Heathrow Airport. And the way it worked was over a 60-day period, normal rental cars would be driving in and driving out. And we had a camera system set up at the entrance and at the exit. So 4 cameras, which as the vehicle would drive through without stopping, would take a 360 scan of the vehicle and would upload those images to the cloud where we would process them and we would report and save the damages, the defects, the issues, scratches, dents, etc. that we found on the vehicle. And then after that 60-day period, we compared the damages that we'd found to the damages that were recorded by their human inspectors within their human inspection system. They have a mobile application that they record their damages in. And when we compared the number of damages we found to the number of damages they found, we, as you said, found 22% more damage. And what was interesting is where the differences were. So if you were to imagine a Venn diagram of damage we found versus damage they found, there was a relatively large section in the middle, section of overlap, which would be expected. And then there was some damages that their inspectors found that our cameras didn't find. And that would be typically areas of the vehicle where maybe just from an external visual inspection, you can't see as easily. And then there was this 22% that our cameras found that the human inspectors didn't find. And those damages were typically lower on the vehicle, so where someone would have to maybe get down on their knees to actually see it. And also we saw an interesting pattern that towards the end of a shift, we'd be picking up more damage. So potentially people were getting tireder, there was a handover process, they weren't paying as much attention to the inspections. So what we're able to provide Avis is more damages found, and that means more damages that they can fairly charge customers, and also more consistent inspections, both across the vehicle and across different times of day. And of course, for the actual renters, you have this massive benefit where you would not get charged for any pre-existing damage that's found on the vehicle because we're scanning the vehicles as they leave as well. So there's no anxiety that small scratches and dents that were on the vehicle when you picked it up would be charged back to you because we have perfect visual evidence of the condition of the vehicle when you rented it.
Because one thing that I was reading about as well is that you're able to detect damages without having a prior image of the vehicle. But in this case, you would actually detect them as they're exiting the parking lot, and also when they go back to the rental parking lot.
Yeah, so something that we don't do is we don't maintain a database of 3D vehicle models that we'd have to try and keep up to date with every different new model that was launched, all the different configurations of the models. So instead, and this is where our sort of core IP and where our algorithmic efforts are focused on, is just on seeing that vehicle for the first time, we are able to create a model on the spot of that vehicle. So just from the one set of images, of 360 imagery, we're able to create a model of that vehicle. And that model we're able to pass through a series of neural networks to assess for potential issues in the vehicle. Now, of course, as you said, if the vehicle's driving out and driving back in, then we have a delta between leaving and coming back. And then we can provide more information on top of this, and you can show which new damage was picked up as part of the rental. And that extends back to the whole vehicle history. So you can start to see over the vehicle's lifetime, the condition of the vehicle change, damages appear, damages get repaired, the vehicle comes into the fleet, and then ultimately the vehicle leaves the fleet.
And from a technical perspective, what's the logistic bits that you have to install? Do you have to set up cameras?
So the hardware is actually very simple and almost exactly what a normal CCTV installation would have. So you have cameras. The basic version would be 4 cameras. So you can imagine sort of a rectangle around a vehicle as they're going through. So you capture the front left, front right, rear right, rear left. We can also put cameras above the vehicle to scan the roof, and additional angles to take certain parts of the vehicle, or if they're an unusual shape of vehicle, we can change the configuration. And then you have a recording device, what's called an NVR, or a network video recorder, which takes the video files from the CCTV cameras and is triggered by motion detection to save a certain snippet, so normally around 10 seconds. And that means we have, for our basic system, 4 videos, which cover all around the vehicle. We then have a router, which is connected to the internet, and that will send those video files up to our AWS servers for processing. And that's all the installation takes. Now, if customers want to be able to see damage at night, for example, we can install additional cameras, but it's really as simple as that.
Right. The only thing that it doesn't do, though, is inside the vehicles.
Yes. So currently we have a mobile application, and that allows you to manually complete an inspection of inside the vehicle. And actually on our product roadmap this year is to look for how we could, for example, ask a user to take a certain number of images and then process those images. Say you're standing outside the vehicle, you open the door, you take one looking inside. So how we could process them to find interior damage. Similarly, there are lots of vehicles, more commercial vehicles, but increasingly general personal vehicles that have some kind of camera system on the interior as well. And we're looking at how we could get information off that to assess the interior condition of the vehicle as well.
From a product perspective, do you think it's going to overtake the existing manual inspections, or do you think it's actually valuable enough to complement it?
So the way we see it is particularly in the context of the world that we live in today, the ability to be able to remotely inspect vehicles, we think is going to be very powerful. So there is still a need, a use case to have a human involved. For example, if they're managing a customer claim, a dispute, there is some level of communication that's required. Also, if it's a very, very detailed mechanical or safety inspection, then right now you would probably want an expert inspector to review the flagged damage that comes from the Ravin system. So for now, we can definitely see this hand in hand. But what you're doing is you're taking the responsibility off the person who's standing by the vehicle, and actually you're making it remote and giving people capability to inspect hundreds of vehicles every hour, instead of having to do a 5-minute walk around inspection.
Your customers are car rental agencies. How do you iterate with them? How do you validate the customer value proposition of your product? I imagine that it's quite a long iteration loop.
Yeah, so car rental is actually where we started, but we work in a number of automotive verticals. So car rental is one. Car sales, used car sales, online car sales, transactional platforms is another. Insurance is another. And then you have all these logistics and background businesses that are working. So, for example, in the repossessions market, people that are collecting vehicles from people who haven't been able to pay for their loans, for example, and they're taking the vehicles off them. They're also doing vehicle inspection. So every year there's over 1 billion vehicles that are inspected, 1 billion vehicle inspections taking place. And the vast majority of these are manual. And the vast majority of these, we believe we have the capabilities to help speed up and make more accurate. So when it comes to actually testing and verifying our hypotheses with customers, you're right, in the automotive space, you do have quite long cycles, quite long development cycles, and particularly because we're working on computer vision technology, you tend to have quite long internal development cycles as well. But what we do is we do a number of different things. So one, we have market validation. And by that, I mean, we are able to test lots of ideas at a business development level while having conversations with customers. So we're able to create marketing material for either something that exists or something that we're planning to create. And as part of our sales team's conversations, they will get feedback from potential customers or existing customers to help validate our vision. And then the next thing we do is when we're actually building for someone, we tend to have B2B relationships. So we tend to have a pretty big company that we're working with, and we try and co-develop a solution with them. So there are some, I guess, products in our range that are completely off the shelf. And if you're a rental car company, you could buy our system, install it. But even then, you probably have your own way of managing your claims process. You probably have your own software for doing check-ins. And there is a period of integration. And in that period of integration, we're able to test a lot of our ideas and to validate a lot of our existing product, and also to start to test and start to implement MVPs for new products that we might have. And because we're engaged in this co-development iteration cycle with these customers, we can get kind of constant feedback, even though we know that developing a new algorithmic model in a certain area is going to take us a long time. But we can still do that testing as we go through, as we work with them.
Yes, and actually that's the thing. You have a pretty distributed team from a geographical perspective. So you're based in London. You have some associates in Israel and a development team in Ukraine. How do you deal with this from a product development perspective?
We do. So the reason that we're set up like that is that the company is a British-Israeli company. So it was co-founded by two Israelis, one who was living in the UK, one who was based out of Israel. All our R&D and our algorithmic development is based out of Israel, for a very good reason that they have some, if not the world's best, computer vision engineers. They have a long history of developing this technology, particularly for the military, and they also have a very thriving automotive startup scene. But most of our customers, the vast majority of our customers, are not in Israel. And for that reason, we have product and design based out of London, which is our European headquarters. And we also have business development team based out of Austin, Texas, to serve our US market. And then, as you say, we have primarily our front-end development team based in Kiev, where we have some fantastic talent pool for both front-end and QA. So that's why we're set up like that. This brings with it some challenges, and particularly the way we have to communicate within the company is something that we've had to put in place systems, and we've had to sort of test and learn as we go forward. And even down to, not everyone's first language is English. So we have Russian speakers, we have Hebrew speakers, we have English speakers, and our company language is English. But it does really change how you communicate, how clear you have to make yourself when you're trying to, for example, communicate a new feature that needs to be built. The level of detail you need to put into the acceptance criteria and to the designs is very different when you're working with a distributed team, because it's just not as easy for you to go and stand next to someone and just sort of draw some things out on a piece of paper and have a back and forth. And even when they're starting to develop it, although we're very comfortable with video conferencing, with just phoning someone up if we have a question, it's still different from being in the same office, having things on the walls, being able to just turn around and shout a question at someone. So that's something that, particularly as the head of product, see as a big part of my role is facilitating those communications and making sure that everyone is understood and making sure that everyone has the opportunity to communicate with everyone else.
Do you think that it actually has impacted your ability to innovate or collaborate? Because that's something which often comes up when talking about remote teams, is that the collaboration is harder, it's more difficult, and it's more difficult for people to innovate and brainstorm ideas together.
I think there's definitely an element of brainstorming and that sort of meeting where you're all huddled around a whiteboard and collaboratively problem solving is harder. I think one thing you have to remember, though, is a lot of the people in the team are very, very technical people who are working on very challenging technical problems. And actually, there's this assumption that an office environment or kind of co-working space is the future of work. But in the reality is most people who are working in those kind of roles need a quiet space to focus. They need dedicated time to get into the flow. Context switching is very, very expensive. And so actually, although maybe some of the design and product things are harder to do through a laptop, actually having setting an engineering requirement, setting a product feature, defining it, and then giving someone the space to go and develop it, I think is a very productive way of working.
And considering the current context under we are all right now with the corona outbreak and the lockdown, how has it impacted your business and how are you responding to this?
So we've seen some big changes with our customers. I mean, you can imagine with rental being a big space that we were working in, with the travel industry essentially gone, rental car companies are having a very tough time. And so we've definitely seen some challenges with some existing projects that we were hoping would move to scale this year, are probably going to be pushed back. We don't know exactly how long for. But I think a company like ours, the size of ours, with the technology we have, there's also a lot of opportunities out there. So, for example, we've started to push harder onto the deliveries and fleets market. So there are still a lot of vehicles on the road. They're not private vehicles, but they are commercial vehicles who are delivering the things we need while everyone's in quarantine. Another opportunity we see is a core foundation to what we do is enabling remote inspections. So not needing as many people actually on the ground by the vehicles, but having people who are able to work from home, who are able to use our web platform to see images of vehicles, to see the suggested damages, to verify them, and then to start to create maintenance tasks or reconditioning tasks if vehicles need to be fixed. So we see a big opportunity to move into that space. And I think the two other things, so one, we have a mobile application, and the mobile application does a similar thing. So it allows you to take images of the vehicle, and we provide a kind of seamless 360-degree scan, and then they're processed through our algorithmic pipeline, and they also enable people to then review the output of that remotely. And I think the other thing that it allows to do, maybe more generally on the product and technology side, is since we were founded, we've been moving very, very quickly. We've been developing lots of different things. And for sure, we've built up some technical debt. And by having this period of time where maybe there's slightly fewer customer deployments, but still a lot of customer interest, we're able to slightly turn inward and focus on a lot of things that we've just let build up, or UI issues that we've just accepted up until now because there's been customer deliveries that we needed to make. And now we can actually go back and we can take a deeper look at our whole range of products, and we can start to make those updates that we've really needed.
Exactly, and that's exactly the kind of thing that I think about when I think about Ravin, because you guys have the core engine, which provides an initial set of functionality, and then it's about which kind of market you sell it to. And if you think about pivoting, it's actually pretty easy to retarget it for different kind of customers and different kind of use cases.
Yeah, exactly. The software and the user interface is, for us, pretty customizable and pretty easy to do. The difficult thing is getting those algorithms that are able to automatically detect damage, and that's what we've spent the last few years really building. That's the core of what we do, and that continues to get better and better. So exactly as you say, there are different use cases, many different use cases for our technology, and because of the way we work, because of our flexibility, we are able to quite quickly create an experience that would serve use cases across the whole automotive value chain.
Definitely. And I think that what is going to define the successful startup during this crisis is the ability to iterate as fast as possible and to readapt to the new market.
And to give you an example of that, so one of my jobs is to own the product roadmap. And what we've had to do over the last few weeks is to develop a series of different scenarios. Now, I don't think anyone can really predict how long the actual lockdown will be, and then also how long or how impactful the follow-on effects will be for different industries. But we have to create a set of scenarios that we validate both internally, we come up with internally, and also that we communicate to our board and our shareholders. And those scenarios all have different product roadmaps. So it's one of my big tasks over the last few weeks has been to come up with these different options. And depending on whether people are going to be at home for 3 weeks or people are going to be at home for 6 months, we could potentially have a very different product that we bring to market. So it's quite a challenging time, but it's also very, very interesting if you're interested in problem solving and coming up with new ideas and trying to reconfigure your existing technology and try and solve some new problem that maybe hadn't appeared before this happened.
Yeah, if we consider the needs of social distancing, AI and computer vision are really at the forefront, and they're really technologies that can allow us to execute on this, and to save people in the long term.
Yeah.
A final question before we go. If you had a piece of advice for the people viewing this video, what would it be?
So I think, and it links to what we were discussing earlier, and it's not just relevant to product managers, and it's not just relevant to people who are working in tech, but something that has become very obvious to me working in a company where people speak different languages, where people live in all different corners of the world, is your ability to clearly communicate your ideas, clearly communicate concepts, clearly have disagreements and come to a resolution is absolutely fundamental for working in these kind of teams, in teams that are distributed, in teams where you have different cultures, and in teams where you're working on solving complex problems. So I think it's an underappreciated skill to be able to really take something that may be a bit of a jumble in your head and turn it into a very coherent idea, whether that's through a very clear email, presentation you're giving, some kind of slides that you might be preparing, or even the way you're structuring and commenting on your code. I think for me, it's been something that I've had to really work on, and something that I've really seen dividends from getting that structure and that clarity of thought.
Thank you so much for your time, Neil. It's really exciting to see what you guys are doing, and I wish you and Ravin.AI all the success.
Thanks, Ben. It's been a pleasure.